Hello and welcome to Press TV's Spotlight. I'm Marzia Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. The largest open-air prison, Gaza, is being bombarded once again. The Israeli regime has used thousands of tons of bombs, as it's announced, on one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Almost half of the population is under 18, but that is not a deterrent for Tel Aviv, as so far more than 687, the new numbers, that Palestinians have been killed, and at least 140 of them children, and over 3,600 injured. This all follows a successful operation carried out by the Palestinian resistance on Saturday, during which, for the first time since the 1948 occupation, parts of Palestinian land were liberated. 800 Israelis were killed and dozens were taken as prisoner. I'd like to welcome my guests to this program. Help me look at all of this. Harley Schlanger, spokesman LaRouche organization out of Germany. And Mick Napier, co-founder, Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, of Edinburgh. Thank you both for being with me. Let me start it off with Harley. Do you think that what we're witnessing, the constant bombing of the Gaza Strip and a lack of condemnation by Western governments, is indicative of the reason the resistance has actually done what it has? Nothing is said against the regime, even when it uses illegal phosphorus bombs against civilians or warplanes constantly bombing civilians. And this has been going on, well, the siege has been going on for 16 years now. I mean, your take on this, is there anything besides resistance that's left for these individuals, for these groups?
Well, if you look at the media in the West, you would think this came out of nowhere, that this was just a reaction of crazed terrorists, and that there's no explanation or excuse for it. Now, what you point out is absolutely the case, that there's been an ongoing, what they call in the West, a frozen conflict. But it's not frozen if you actually live in Gaza or in the Palestinian areas of the West Bank. It's been an occupation. It's been a blockade. It's been a denial of food and medicine and jobs for decades. And what you're seeing, I mean, I just read a piece by Chaz Freeman, the former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, who actually, I think, had it right. He said, this is a reaction to Netanyahu's extremist anti-Arab policies, including the settler invasion of the al-Aqsa mosque, and including the expansion of settlements. And he said it exposes the bankruptcy of the U.S. and the great power geopolitical game, which basically treats the Palestinians as non-humans. So he also made another interesting point. It was a reaction of people who have been left hopeless with no real hope, but that by striking out against their oppressor, it does give a certain amount of hope and also exposure to the continuing crimes of the Israeli policy with U.S. and NATO support.
Well, Mick, let me quote the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. He says a complete siege on Gaza now is going to be implemented. No food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting animals and will treat them accordingly. I mean, how is there not a major reaction to this type of statement made by an alleged government official? I mean, your take on his statement, first of all, and then, of course, the lack of reaction.
Well, it's completely disgusting, isn't it? But the Israeli leaders have been behaving in the most disgusting way, using the most violent and genocidal language over many years, and not just the present crop, but previous ones. Without any sanction from the West, because the West gives Israel unstinting support. I mean, that support was fairly limited, actually, until 1967, after Israel defeated Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, and proved that it could crush proved that at that time it could crush a challenge to Western domination, then the aid started to flow to Israel. And if Israel can do no wrong, it's very simple. There is, I mean, it's fascinating to see today sort of cold-eyed monster, psychopaths like von der Leyen and Boris Johnson and various other people develop what they want us to think is a conscience, and they're on a moral high horse against the Palestinian resistance. Actually breaking out of Gaza and having the temerity to attack Israeli soldiers and settlers. But while Israel was poisoning the water in Gaza, i.e. allowing the water to deteriorate to become undrinkable as deliberate policy, they didn't have a conscience. During the Great March of Return, when Israel was mowing down unarmed demonstrators with live ammunition and maiming tens of thousands on an industrial scale, the British government continued to sell sniper rifle parts, and there was not a peep of condemnation from these people now riding a very high horse, putting their conscience on display, and so on and so on. There is no crime which Israel could commit, no crime at all, which would incur condemnation. They have a justice system for Palestinians who have no votes, with 99.7% conviction rate. Once you're in that system, you have no chance. Now, that's a system for Palestinians. The system for Jews is relatively humane, relatively okay. But this is disgusting. It's beyond disgusting. But no condemnation has uttered forth from Germany or Britain or America or Belgium. So that's where we are. It's not going to change. That's how it's always been. And they support people. They support any, criminal organization, if you like, which is aligned with the West. If you're against the West, if you refuse to accept Western hegemony, you can do no right. Anything you do is terrorism. Now, we know Israelis appear on the media all the time. Terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism balloons, terror tunnels. Anything Palestinians can do is terrorism. Mm-hmm. And even the non-violent attempt through the BDS movement is condemned as terrorism. So there's nothing Palestinians can do which will get any Western support at the official level, and there's nothing Israel can do that will get any condemnation. That's simple. And if you can see this, if you can see it so simply, I think we can discuss why that's the case and what the future looks like.
Okay. Well, Harley, Europeans and the Americans have fully supported, of course, Israel, as we've just heard. And Washington says it's sending a warship now and other supplies or equipment. This whole creation of the Israeli entity, what came about because of the West and its own guilt and killing the Jews. And now then they created this entity, put it in Palestinian land, and now they continue to support the oppression of Palestinians. What does it all mean? Tell me, you break it down of what is going on.
Well, as your other guest pointed out, what we're seeing is the most blatant, disgusting hypocrisy on the highest level coming from the West. But that shouldn't be surprising. We just saw a case where in the Canadian Parliament, they celebrated a Nazi SS veteran as supposedly a freedom fighter against Russia. So we see this and we've become accustomed to it. And the biggest threat is that in the West, people tolerate this. They accept it. They don't even question the media narratives.
I guess then the question would be here, why is that the case, Harley? Why is that the case, that they do not question this mainstream narrative?
Well, I think it's because it's so all-encompassing. Going back to education, look, if you look at this situation, this is nothing new. The policy of massive oppression of the Palestinian population has gone on since 1948. It's something that is just part of the environment. So they've normalized the idea that anyone who opposes Israel is some kind of anti-Semite and subhuman person. Now, in the meantime, they do give a pass to the settlers, the people who go in and destroy and steal land from the Palestinians. That's not something that happened 30 years ago. That's happening today. And so you create a normalization of these kinds of oppressive policies. And so, people have no way of really thinking outside the box. Now, when something like this happens, when there's an uprising, some people start to question and say, well, why did this happen? Why are people willing to give up their life for this fight? And what we have to do is make sure that people in the West recognize that the West is not the good guys in this. The unipolar order is a global fascist order that's out to destroy Russia, China, continue the oppression in the developing sector. And let me make one other point on this. If you look at the timing, the Israeli reaction is coming precisely at a moment when the whole unipolar order is shaking because of the BRICS, because of the rejection of the Ukraine proxy war against Russia. The BRICS just added Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates. And this policy of giving full support to Israel is an attack on the attempt not just of the Palestinians for justice, but of the whole global South to break out of the colonial regime, which we've just taken for granted for the last 50 years.
Well, Mick, Netanyahu has said that Israel, the way it's will be dealing with the Gaza Strip, will change the Middle East forever. What do you think he means?
Means another, mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Now they're saying this is going to be a long war. It's not going to be a few weeks, and that means that extended over a very long period of time, they can probably kill 100 or a couple of hundred people, or even many more people per day in Gaza by keeping on shelling. So I suspect it means much more killing, and I think there are people inside the Israeli government at the moment saying that this is an opportunity to drive out more Palestinians, possibly into Jordan, to Egypt, although the Egyptian government would have say against that. I think it's a very deep for the Palestinians. They look for opportunities. 7 was a great opportunity for them to expel hundreds of thousands of Palestinians during a war, so they may be doing so again. I also don't know why the Americans are sending aircraft carriers. Either it's because Biden faces a re-election and he wants to, demonstrate how tough he is, tougher than Trump, or they may be planning an expansion of the war, because it may be that Israel feels that it's losing its previously dominant position of being able to terrorize the whole region.
What are you? Wait, let me stop you right there, Mick. Let me get a clarification there. What are you saying? You're saying the possibility that the United States could get directly involved in this conflict?
Yes, I'm not saying they will. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it's a possibility. Why have they sent those aircraft carriers, the aircraft carrier and the ships? It doesn't make Israel look strong that they need an American aircraft carrier to protect them. I think we have to deal with the possibility that they will widen the war. Now, they've been badly burned in Iraq, but they've devastated Afghanistan, they've devastated Libya, they've devastated parts of Syria. They devastate countries, and they may be thinking that now's the time to try to negate the Palestinian victory, the resistance victory, because it really dealt a crushing blow to Israeli confidence. They may feel now's the time that they simply have to take an opportunity to reverse that, and I don't know what they'll do. Israel's a wounded animal, but wounded animals are very dangerous, and America, although it's in decline, is also very, very dangerous indeed. They killed 3 million Vietnamese. They're capable of terrible, terrible crimes. And we have no choice but to fight, but I'm actually quite fearful. I think the future looks very dark because an imperial power in decline can be very dangerous indeed.
Well, Harley, let's talk about, because I want to go back, I will go back to what Mick just talked about, but first I want to go back to the significance overall on what took place on Saturday, because it was a historic operation, Operation al-Aqsa flood. Um, do you think that this has changed the scenario in general, that it has added to, given them more confidence as far as the Palestinian resistance? Or how do you see this affecting the overall situation there?
Well, I think that's what the Israelis are afraid of. That's also what Biden and people like Sullivan and Blinken are afraid of, that if the Palestinians, under these extraordinarily horrible conditions, are able to mount an offensive like that, that it gives hope to any people in the world who are dealing with the effects of an imperial neo-colonial power. Now, I think that the other side of this, though, is that this is a defensive posture from the West. The United States, as the unipolar power, has suffered significant loss of influence as a result of its inability to use the proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. And its threats against China, they're not scaring the Chinese. So the deployment of naval vessels off the coast of Israel, who does that scare? You know, the idea that the United States can go in and restore order is seen by many of the countries now in the world as a joke. So I think the effect of the events on Saturday and the follow through is that it does give a sense that resistance is not futile. Resistance can have an effect. It may be a short-term effect, but the longer-term effect is to show that people are willing to fight when it's a question of protecting family, protecting nation, protecting the population against oppression. And that's an important lesson. And we saw that with the BRICS conference. We see that in Africa now, with countries saying we're not going to submit any longer to this unipolar order. So I think this is part of a global revolution against neo-colonialism and imperialism. Whether it succeeds or not partly will depend on whether people in the global north, in the Western countries, wake up and recognize that their governments are their enemies to their own people.
Right. Well, Mick, you said that you were concerned or worried about the current situation, but the pressure that has been on the Palestinian population, I mean, it's basically been there, if you want to go back to 1948 from the original occupation up until now, and of course the 16 years of Gaza being under siege. So with what you're saying, basically, do you think that what happened on Saturday made the situation worse? Or basically, is this the only way to freedom, that there has to be sacrifices? Unfortunately, people are dying, but they were dying anyway. But now there is some hope from the Palestinian resistance. I mean, your analysis of that.
Well, there's no doubt the Palestinian resistance has shaken the whole area. It's changed everybody's calculation. The Israelis thought that they had the Palestinians crushed and defeated, that they could manage the West Bank, they could manage Gaza, just give them a little bit more money, a few more permits to work in Israel and feed their family, allow some, to ameliorate things very, very slightly. They were so wrong. What happened on Saturday morning, I woke up on Saturday morning and started watching the television. And it was unbelievable. It was incredible. I defy anyone to say they thought that this was a possibility last week. This is going to be discussed and taught in military colleges around the world for a very, very long time indeed. And it will be studied by the professionals because this is a remarkable achievement. Now, all the pieces have been blown up. Now, what takes its place? That is to be decided by people in struggle. But no, of course, the alternative for the Palestinians was to die on their knees. Not just them to die, but their children and their grandchildren in the Gaza cage to live and die there without any hope of a better life. This was a remarkable achievement by the Palestinian resistance, a stunning achievement. And the Israelis have not even recovered from the shock yet. So no, I very much think it's a huge plus in the area. What I'm saying is it's not over yet, and the Israelis are capable of mass murder. They revel in mass murder. Every dead Palestinian for them is a success, man, woman, or child, because they want Palestine without any Palestinians. And they've said that repeatedly. Our governments know that. So we reach the situation now where all the Western governments are backing a government with obvious genocidal ministers like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and others, and there are many, many others as well. So we get them backing a genocidal regime. And Biden was asked yesterday or the day before, and he said, we support Israel for what it does. Now that means not just the massacres of the past, not just the full spectrum criminality, but something even worse than that. They've just been given the go-ahead, patted on the head and said, America approves, go ahead and kill as many Palestinians as you want. So it's obviously worrying because there is not yet a force that can fully protect the Palestinians. But the resistance will, of course, give the Israelis one hell of a run for their money.
And Harley, where do you see this situation going right now? Because as we speak, unfortunately, the Israelis are just pounding the Gaza Strip. But overall, your assessment of where do you think this situation can go?
Well, again, I think you have to understand that the reason Netanyahu is doing what he's doing is that he's in an extremely weak position because he's so polarizing even within Israel. And he's going to try to use this and, in fact, use the murderous policy to reassert the need for an Israeli strongman, namely for him. And I think that's what his intention is, more ethnic cleansing, driving more people out, and rallying the forces of the West around him by saying that we, Israel, are the democracy and the Palestinians are the animals and the terrorists. But my thinking on this is that what will ultimately occur depends on whether there's enough conscience in the North and in the global West to recognize that you cannot kill a spirit, that there's a soul of the Palestinian people that will not submit. And that's something that defines the nature of human beings. The struggle for justice, for a better future for our children and grandchildren. And it's my hope that those of us who live in the West who are watching this can take this message to others and say, look, this is our fight too. Don't just leave it to the Palestinian children who, without support from the West, are going to be slaughtered. We have a responsibility to fight against this kind of policy coming from not just the Israeli government, but from Western governments. As Mick said, we've seen what the West did in Libya, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, and in what they're doing in Ukraine. They're killing their own allies, the Ukrainians. So if people get a sense of this, there is a moral, righteous cause here, and it's not the cause of Netanyahu and the United States. Perhaps we can shift world opinion to bring support to the people of Palestine.
Okay. And just 1 minute, Mick, Harley just talked about that support. We have been seeing demonstrations take place in many Western countries right now. Your take on that? Do you think that this situation, that more people are becoming aware of the Palestinian cause, despite the major PR campaign going by the Israeli regime?
It's very important to understand that for many, many years, Israel has been deeply unpopular in Western public opinion, not among elites, not in terms of what you can say publicly, but when you measure what people think, they're deeply hostile towards Israel and tend to be sympathetic to the Palestinians. That's why there's such repression in America, Germany, and Britain as well, trying to shut down pro-Palestine voices. If Israel were not so unpopular, and the Zionists know this, and they discuss this among themselves, then they wouldn't need to shut us down. They wouldn't need to attack us. So I don't think there's a major task to persuade Western public opinion to be supportive of Palestine. There's a task to find out how to channel that. I can persuade somebody in 5 minutes to despise Israel. In another 5 minutes and they'll support Palestine. It takes a long time to persuade them that we can change things.
Okay, and on that note, so sorry to interrupt you, but we're out of time. Appreciate both of you being with us. Harley Schlanger, spokesman of LaRouche organization out of Germany. Mick Napier, co-founder, Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign out of Edinburgh. And thank you, viewers, for being with us on another Spotlight. I'm Marzia Hashimi. See you next time. Goodbye.